You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear 2 students, Peter and Mary, planning their weekend. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Well, Mary, you're free this weekend, and so am I. So let's plan the agenda. We said we're going to see a movie on Saturday, right?
Yes.
But what time?
It's cheapest in the afternoon and very expensive at night, of course, so let's go in the afternoon.
Sounds good. Have some fun before preparing that night for all our studies.
Peter and Mary will see the movie in the afternoon, so afternoon has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Well, Mary, you're free this weekend, and so am I. So let's plan the agenda. We said we're going to see a movie on Saturday, right?
Yes.
But what time?
It's cheapest in the afternoon and very expensive at night, of course, so let's go in the afternoon.
Sounds good. Have some fun before preparing that night for all our studies.
But you mentioned that new action movie.
Sure.
Well, that's what you want to see, but I'd rather see that comedy.
I thought we'd agreed on the action movie.
You just said that you'd like it. I didn't. My friends tell me my movie is very funny too.
Okay, I'm fine with that. A comedy it is. We can see my action film another time. So that's Saturday afternoon planned, and that night we'll just eat at a restaurant.
Where?
I don't have much money, but there are some nice cheap places near the cinema. What about Pizza King?
I'm not that keen on pizza, actually. There's a noodle place near there. What about that?
Oh, I really wanted to eat pizza.
And you know how fattening pizza is, and not nearly as healthy as noodles either.
Okay, we'll do it your way again. Noodles it is.
Okay, that's Saturday done. But Sunday, we have to study, right?
You bet. We'd better start early too. 10 a.m, let's say. We can meet in the library about that time.
Okay, let me write that in my diary. But 10 in the morning is a bit late, don't you think? We've got a lot to do, so I should think 9 a.m. is the very latest we should meet.
9 a.m? Sunday morning? Are you serious? What about 9:30?
No, it's important to be disciplined, so I'll be there at that earlier time.
All right, 9 a.m. The early bird catches the worm or passes the exam, right?
Right. But should we study for the science class or the maths one?
Or even history. There's so much to study.
Well, let's just stick to the original plan. Science, right?
Yeah, we can study for maths another time.
Okay, that's decided. Now, that just leaves the afternoon.
But there's lunch first. I think we can have my choice of restaurant this time. That's only fair.
But the university cafeteria is not far, and cheap too.
But I thought we could have pizza.
There's a nice sandwich bar there, and that's a healthier option. I'm doing this for your own good. Look at you, Peter. You're already overweight.
Okay. We'll take the healthy option again.
Sandwiches it is, and you'll thank me for this later.
Yeah.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Well, Mary, I think we've planned our day well, but I've always wanted to ask you what you think of our course of study.
I think it's good. Very good, in fact.
So do I.
Apart from some of the teachers.
What do you mean?
Well, our maths tutor, Mr. Vernon, is okay,
Sure,
but he doesn't seem to care much about the subject matter.
but he knows his stuff. I think he's excellent. I'm surprised you don't think so too.
He's satisfactory, as I said, but I'd just like him to care more or try a bit harder.
But he's smart and explains things well. What more could you want?
Just for him to have more passion about what he does. He could be more like, say, Mr. Harrison.
Mr. Harrison is always late, though, and he's never well prepared. Rushes in, notes falling everywhere, a complete mess.
But it's his attitude that matters. Mr. Harrison wants to help students. He has passion, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, a passion for disorganisation and presenting things in a very confusing way. That's why I like Miss Whitehead. She comes on time and presents everything very clearly with her PowerPoint displays.
But she's also rather mechanical. She just clicks buttons and the PowerPoint shows another slide.
Very clear slides, and she explains it clearly as well, and that's the most important thing.
But she's not connecting much with the students.
Ah, come on. Only the bad students are not paying attention. All the rest, those who really care, are listening, and the information is given clearly, concisely, and she knows her stuff.
I don't deny that. I'm just saying that a truly good teacher needs a human connection with the students. Without that, teachers ultimately fail in their purposes, and thus she must be considered a failure.
Phew, you are a tough one to please, I'll say that much.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a student union officer explaining about the union's functions and services to a group of new university students. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello everyone. Now, here you all are, new university students. And the first question you probably have is, what is a student union? Another question is, do I have to join? Well, regarding this second question, let me say that membership used to be compulsory in the past, but that did cause some controversy, particularly from students who wanted to remain free and unaffiliated, and this university responded. So, joining up is no longer compulsory. It's totally up to you, although I'll admit there is a fairly strong obligation to join, since all students benefit from the large variety of services that we offer. We do understand, however, that many might be unwilling to join because of a supposed political slant to the union. Traditionally, student unions have been seen as being dominated by the left, and I suppose that's still true to a large extent. Here, however, at this university, our union discourages such one-sided viewpoints, and students across the whole political spectrum are welcome. Thus, if you feel that you are a conservative type, in other words, leaning to the right, you are particularly urged to join to provide a more balanced representation. Now, let me move back to the first question. What are we? We are a formal organisation, but totally independent of the educational body. We make our own rules, rent our own premises, and organise ourselves as we wish, and our mission is basically to help you. For example, do you remember how you all arrived in late February to have an orientation week? That gave you an invaluable induction into life here, right? Well, the student union organised all the festivities at the end of that. The barbecues, partying and drinking, and even the musical entertainment as well. We'll do that again on occasions, and as always, those events take place on the football ground. Now, do you have any questions before I move on?
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, let me tell you more about the student union and its basic functions. In general, there are 3: social, organisational, and representational. Let's look at the first one. Basically, the union provides many social outlets for you to relax and have a better life at university. If you go to our union office, you'll find a list of the many clubs and societies we have, where you can make many friends with people who share a common interest. So, after class, sit with them in the cafeteria and discuss whatever takes your fancy. We also maintain sporting facilities and even our own gym, allowing you to relieve some of that pressure and worry after a particularly hard session in the classroom. And we have some small shops and other places where you can buy clothes and sporting gear, in other words, some retail outlets. And if you flash your student union card, you'll get up to 20% discount at the bookshop. But unfortunately, there are no discounts at the union cafeteria. Sorry, no cheap cappuccinos. Finally, there's a student union newspaper, and you're welcome to contribute or put in advertisements if you're buying and selling goods or textbooks. You can also place notices of a more personal nature on the notice board of the union office itself. All right, let's move on to our more serious functions, which are helping you get through life here, as well as representing you in times of trouble. Regarding the second issue, if you have a problem or a grievance, or if you feel under pressure or depressed for reasons both inside and outside the university, for example, perhaps a dispute with your landlord or the people in your local gym, then come to us. We have a range of counsellors and helpers, and even some lawyers, who you can meet in the conference room. So just sip a cup of tea or coffee with them and tell them your troubles, and they'll be all ears. Basically, there's every reason to join the student union, since whatever you need, whether it be social or representational, we will help you.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear 2 students Dylan and Emily discussing a presentation which they will have to make. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Okay, Emily, as you know, we've got to do this presentation together.
I know, I'm a little bit nervous about it. Standing up in front of all those people. And what if the presentation fails? What if...
Don't worry, I've been reading a book about giving effective presentations. It's not that hard, but the way to do it is certainly not always obvious either. For example, do you know what the most important part of a presentation is?
The final summary, I guess.
The opposite. The first minute, in fact. The theory says that first minute is when you win or lose the audience. If you lose them at that point, you'll probably never get them back. So that's why you need a hook.
A hook? You mean like when you catch fish?
Yes. I mean, not exactly, but yes. We want to catch the audience, right? So we need to start in a way which wakes them up, gets them interested, and makes them watch us.
I see.
Basically, no matter how good our presentation is, if the message doesn't get across, the presentation fails. So we need to give a fact which really amazes them, or an interesting story, or pose a dilemma which makes them think, something they can really puzzle over. It's better if this is related to the subject, of course, something to do with management in our case.
So that's the hook?
That's right. From then on, we'll just follow the basic advice.
Like what?
Like, talk to your audience, as equals. Don't talk down to them or up to them. They're just the same as us, right?
You're right, Some of the best presentations I've ever seen sounded just like conversations.
Exactly. And what else made them good?
Well, the speakers sort of involved me in the topic and issues under discussion by asking questions, by referring to me, by saying you, and, well, basically they were interesting.
And they're exactly the tips we'll follow too. It should be fine.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Emily, I think this will be a fine presentation, but how are we going to divide it up? For example, who's going to open it, you or me?
Well, I think you have a very natural style, so you should start. This talk has 5 main parts, so you can introduce it and then do part 1.
That's the historical context or background to the issue.
Yes, then I'll do part 2 about current views. You do part 3 and I'll do part 4, leaving both of us to handle the question time.
I'm okay with that. In part 1, I'll probably speak at length about Hoffman's theory, about management styles, and compare differences in culture in relation to the style of management used.
That sounds good. Those differences are important and certainly relevant to the current times. Hoffman makes some excellent points too on this issue. That's why I'll follow up with present-day perspectives and viewpoints on this, such as the problems facing today's managers in the complex multicultural workplace, where basically one can no longer assume one is dealing with a single culture in the workplace, but actually a multiculture.
That sounds good also. Then I'll take over, discussing the implications and problems of this.
I suppose you'll look at the pluralist movement.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but then I changed my mind. I've decided I'll look at the productive diversity argument. It's more interesting anyway, so I'll go with that.
Then I'll tell everyone what we've decided is the best business practice, or what is most likely to work in most situations, which is basically ignoring pluralism and productive diversity and linking everything back to Kotter's theory of human universals.
Yes, the theory that argues modern management should target the universals of human nature. Right, and that leaves both of us to field questions at the end.
Are there any questions we can predict so that we have some good answers ready? About resolving industrial disputes, for example?
Well, I'd say that industrial democracy usually surprises people, so we should expect a lot of questions about that.
Yes, the theory is that it increases productivity and reduces industrial delays.
And results in better decision making, but that's all theory. Most people would think that industrial democracy is just about unworkable in practice, so let's be ready to explore that issue in some depth, as well as any other related topics, okay?
Okay.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer talking about brands and branding. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 and 32. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 and 32.
In the Wild West, without fences or defined ownership of land, one man's cattle could easily be mixed up with another. Hence, cattle were branded. That is, a sign was scarred onto their skin using a hot iron brand. Well, we still use the word today, but in a more general sense. Putting it simply, a brand is a name, term, design or symbol which identifies one's seller's goods from another. The car model might be called an Echo, but the brand is Toyota, complete with a Toyota symbol. People will trust brands, leading them to buy other products of the same brand. Then it has achieved brand recognition, which is a very good thing to have. Similarly, perhaps your clothes are Gucci, your jeans are Calvin Klein, your medicine is Procter & Gamble, and your cheesecake is the pleasantly termed Sara Lee. And that's the way you like it. Actually, all those previous brand names show you one way to coin the name of your brand. Just name your company and its products after yourself. This is known as using founders' names, which is all right if your name is catchy and cadent, such as, well, Calvin Klein, but there are many other ways as well.
Before you hear the next part of the lecture, you have some time to look at questions 33 to 35. Now listen and answer questions 33 to 35.
Well, here are some other ways to decide on your new brand name. You could use an acronym such as IBM or AWA, which sounds modern, scientific, and technically proficient. You might also wish to evoke feelings with an evocative name, such as Everest Airlines, where the skies are yours, or Amazon Books, with streams of literature, biggest in the world, or Nike, named after the winged Greek god of victory. Alternatively, you might like to describe your product by using a descriptive brand name, Safe and Sleek Bedding, Ever Alert Security System, and so on. Or you could make it rhyme to be more easily remembered. Reese's Pieces, Faster Pasta, and others. Another method is just to invent a word when none existed before, technically known as a neologism. Names such as Wii, Kodak, or Rolex. And there are more methods as well. Each comes with its own appeal, but ultimately, everyone wants a global brand. Facebook, Pepsi, Nike, a name recognized all around the world.
Before you hear the rest of the lecture, you have some time to look at questions 36 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 36 to 40.
Now, let's go a little deeper into brands. One of the things which companies seek for their brands is an independent identity, or a concept regarding how the buyer feels about or perceives the product. A good example is Marlboro cigarettes with its cowboy imagery and sponsorship of car racing, all targeting a manly, tough male buyer. In other words, the images, commercials, logos, sponsorship, and product packaging are all carefully designed to cultivate a single identity which resonates, in theory, with the target market. The core element of this is the logo, the visual symbol that represents the brand. So, if, for example, the product is for younger people, say Nike jogging shoes, the catch cry is, "Just do it," and high-profile athletes appear in all their advertisements. Think of that Nike logo, that single tick, one of the most recognizable logos in the world. And it's all consistent with the symbolism of power, speed, and freedom. On the other hand, if you are targeting a richer, more mature, and male buyer, say with Rolex watches, the brand image might be one of solidity, sophistication, reliability, and the Rolex logo, a crown, that sign of royalty, of might and power, top of the heap, similarly puts forward this image. If we are targeting the younger teenage market, say with Calvin Klein jeans, the brand image is one of sexiness, rebellion, and freedom from conventions. The logo is simply the name on the jeans, but it is linked to that famous series of sexy models and those controversial ads, which still run to this day. This is all big science now, collectively known as brand management. It's complicated, but when done well, can result in millions of dollars in extra sales.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the Ielts test,